bumped into the most popular girl. She looked at him with disgust and said that Taein was just a filthy otaku. A bully came from behind and slapped him on the head, telling him to go buy bread if he didn't want to get beaten again. Taein was a lonely new student and an otaku. A massive explosion erupted. A hideous monster appeared, roaring. A system screen popped up in front of him, saying he had been chosen, and now he would train for 66,000 years in the Tower of the Other World. If he accepted, he could choose any power. Taein chose a single ability, Absolute Shortcut. In just 1 second, 66,000 years passed. And just like that, this otaku awakened with every power and skill at the maximum level. In the beginning, gates opened and monsters came out. Humanity suffered a devastating loss, and with all that, a few chosen humans gained superpowers or magic-like abilities and fought against the monsters. The protagonist reads this on his phone. Suddenly, he starts to glow brightly and thinks that in his case, out of this entire world, it seemed like he was the only one who was chosen, wondering if this was reality. To get to this point, we must go back to the past. Beyond Taein was an ordinary second-year high school student. He could be considered a total loser, but he was just a guy who really loved reading manhwas. He comments that this week's episode was fun, and that he's going to give it 10 stars since the new manhwa cover was incredible. This was good, so he gives it stars, saves, comments, and donates, sending a message to the author, until he accidentally bumps into a girl. The protagonist immediately tries to apologize, but she asks if he wasn't watching where he was going. She turns around angrily and continues on her way. Tae-in was also in the middle of a platonic romance, but a delinquent hits him on the head, calling him a pervert for making that creepy face. He should stop staring at Jo Yoon-ye like that. Taein thinks that he was the typical rich jerk, but now with the cliche that his dad works at the guy's father's company. So he apologizes, saying that compared to the jerks in manhwas, he was actually a decent guy. The bully tells him to go buy some bread if he doesn't want to go to hell, and Taein walks away, thinking this is all very cliche. But it would be a lie to say Taein isn't satisfied with this life, since he gets to read his manhwas and everything was fine, until an explosion suddenly goes off behind him. He turns around at the sound and comes face to face with a horrendous purple monster. Tae-in thinks this looked like one of those monsters that comes out of a portal in a Hunter story, the kind of thing used to show off the protagonist's powers, or maybe it's for a secondary character to show up and defeat. He prays for a magical girl to save him, but then he notices the delinquent. Wondering why he was there, he bets it's one of those situations where he has to decide whether or not to save the guy who's been bothering him. He wonders how to do that while his classmate is being attacked, until the system appears telling him he has been chosen. The protagonist comments that this status window is really nice. His classmate begs to be saved, terrified, but Tae-in tells him to wait because he's just going to check this out before saving him. Reading that he will now train for 66,000 years in the Tower of the Other World, and if he reaches the top, he will gain divine powers and become humanity's savior. The protagonist complains that they expect him to read everything in a critical situation and should just get to the point, saying it's much better now that it's clearer. His system informs him that if he accepts, he will get one power of his choice to climb the tower. Tae-in celebrates this while his classmate cries in fear of the monster. He asks if it could be anything he wants, and if anything goes. The system confirms, and the protagonist starts thinking of various possibilities where anything he can imagine would be possible. But the Tower of Challenges wasn't easy. He has 1 year to clear each floor, and the only way out is to reach the top or lose his life. The protagonist analyzes for a few seconds, questioning if it was just one skill or item. The delinquent asks if he couldn't go any faster, but the protagonist tells him to wait another second. Then he makes his decision, pressing the accept button. The system asks him to declare the one ability he desires. Tae-in takes a deep breath and replies that he wants a shortcut ticket to climb the 66,666 years of the Tower of Challenges. Even the monster and the bully are left confused. His system questions this. The protagonist says that items are also allowed, so a shortcut ticket should be accepted. Then that system complains that there should be a limit, as this could ruin the whole genre. Tae-in yells that anything was allowed, and the system, which was the central part of the world, was contradicting itself. So that system accepts and gives him the ticket. The protagonist comments that it really works, while it's explained that if he uses the item, he will receive all the tower's rewards. His system asks if he would like to use it, and the protagonist confirms, and so his ticket to skip the Tower of Challenges is activated. A bright light starts to radiate from that spot, hitting the protagonist right after, quickly illuminating the entire city. For a moment, Earth became the brightest star in the entire universe. Tae-in looks at his hands, wondering if it really worked. His system congratulates him for completing the Tower of Challenges, as he will now receive the rewards. His SSS rank powers and abilities are unlocked, with everything maxed out. The monster and the bully are impressed, while the protagonist closes his eyes, meditating. Next, he starts to look at and approach the monster. The bully wonders if that guy just got more handsome. Tae-in says the monster has drawn enough attention, so it should just come and fight. The bully encourages him to do it, and the monster trembles in fear. It charges forward, screaming in anger. Tae-in moves his hand quickly, saying that, as expected in the beginning, the golden rule is a flick on the forehead. This simple flick on the creature ends up deleting it. Everything in front of him at the school starts to be destroyed, radiating throughout the entire city and spreading across the whole country. His simple flick had been planetary. Tae-in thinks this wasn't what he was expecting. He's amazed as the system calculates the rewards, gaining many things for having eliminated 389 gates, conquered a challenge, and killed 1 million monsters. Tae-in thinks he didn't expect this much, with the total casualties caused by him being 2 billion. His bully comments that this was insane, asking what exactly happened there, and Tae-in is impressed by this formality, saying that if he's right, he can use a spell, activating the ability to turn back time. He could reverse all of this, finally using the ability. The effects of the flick start to revert to 0, with the monster reappearing in front of the protagonist. Tae-in finishes his spell now. That monster panics, terrified of all this. The protagonist asks how this works and if it scared the monster, since it's his first time as a transcendent being, wondering where the game balance went while the monster tries to flee. But Tae-in traps it with a coordinate magic spell, saying he feels bad for taking its life twice, so he uses a dimensional portal to send it to another dimension. Tae-in stretches right after that. The bully comments that it was incredible and that he managed to wipe out that terrible monster. The protagonist replies that he didn't do that, he just sent it to another dimension. The delinquent says that was to be expected from Mr. Pervert, and that he knew he could count on him because he had saved his life. Now that he remembers, he hadn't said nice things before. Tae-in says that he saw him trying to protect him from the monster. He had asked him to buy bread earlier if he remembers correctly. The bully gets scared and tells him to forget it, while the protagonist walks towards him. The delinquent tries to shout that everything was fine and he didn't need anything anymore, and he's very sorry, begging for forgiveness. Tae-in analyzes him for a few seconds, telling him to wait a bit, as there's something he needs to do first. Looking outside, the delinquent comes face to face with several monsters attacking the city. He screams in fear and asks to be saved. Tae-in repeats for him to wait a bit, but the bully asks if there's anything more important than saving the school. The protagonist announces that he needs to save his mom and dad first. The bully replies that this was fair. Then the protagonist activates his teleport ability, vanishing from that place. At home, a commercial about an afternoon nap is playing. Tae-in's parents were watching it. The mother asks why it looked like only one person, and the father says it was a perfect day to watch TV on a couch. Until the news interrupts, announcing that Seoul is under attack and everyone must evacuate immediately. His father gets up from the couch, startled, wondering what was happening outside. Monsters were fighting to destroy the city of Seoul. They wonder what in the world was going on, as a monster approaches the window, preparing a power in its fist while Tae-in's parents try to hide. But the protagonist appears behind the creature and asks what's going on. Then he uses his inverted gravity ability on the target upon contact. The monster starts to levitate as high as it can, screaming in panic. Tae-in approaches the window and calls for his parents, telling them he's still their son. His parents ask what's going on and why he's there without taking his shoes off in the living room. Tae-in shouts that it's not important right now. But anyway, they've worked hard to care for him for 16 years. The sight of their son glued to his phone reading manhwas was something that worried them. But they don't have to worry anymore, because he's been chosen as the savior of humanity. His parents ask what nonsense he's talking about. Tae-in explains that he'd always wondered about manhwa protagonists facing calamities like this. Those guys would get powers in their stories or chances to fulfill their desires. But Tae-in wonders if they ever worried about their parents, because he would never be like that, using several enhancements on his own parents. They ask what nonsense their son is talking about. Tae-in declares he will protect his parents above all else, creating barriers around the house. He explains this should keep them safe for now, as the monsters won't be able to lay a finger on them. But now he's going to save the rest of the world, and his parents ask what on earth he's talking about. Tae-in says goodbye, telling them he loves them. He vanishes right after, as his parents say they love him too. Back at school, the protagonist appears, and the bully says he's back. He asks how his parents are, and Tae-in replies that they should be fine now. The bully says that's a relief, but the protagonist remembers the bread he'd sent him to buy, so he says he can't help himself. As a guy who was once bullied by this thug, it's his duty to teach him a lesson. He activates mass summoning magic, frightening the bully. Tae-in says it should be hamburger buns this time, so he should stuff himself with them, shooting several food packages. The bully is inundated with hamburger buns and gets up afterward. Tae-in says he's weak and at most would be a 7 out of 10 on the satisfaction scale. The bully asks what he's talking about, claiming he never did anything wrong enough to deserve this. The protagonist comments that he hasn't shown him enough of the story. He projects a small flashback to show him. He didn't even seem to remember, but Tae-in clearly remembers the sound of mocking laughter as he was beaten, the smell of his burning uniform that was taken off him because it stunk, the taste of the school lunch that was thrown in the toilet and forced into his mouth, the feeling of despair whenever he saw a lock on his glasses. He asks if he doesn't remember, and the delinquent screams that he doesn't and never did that. He admits he sent him to buy bread and is sorry, but he didn't do the rest, and he doesn't even wear glasses. Tae-in asks if he's saying he's wrong, and the bully says that the way he's putting it, it sounds like he really did those things. But the protagonist says he has received his apology and will forgive him, and as a gesture for their future relationship, he will turn him into something he likes. The bully thinks about becoming a bodybuilder. Tae-in activates his transmorph ability and shoots it at the bully. Smoke fills the place and begins to dissipate. Kim Il-jin is transformed into a hamburger bun. He asks what the protagonist did, and Tae-in comments that he's very cute. If he sincerely repents, he'll turn him back to normal, and Il-jin says he's sorry, until a voice calls out to him. Yoon-ye asks what he is. The protagonist turns around, surprised. He says he seems to be the one chosen by the gods, while Il-jin begs to be returned to his original form. Yoon-ye questions if the hamburger is alive, and the protagonist says it's cute. She asks if Tae-in isn't scared. The world had changed so drastically, and many people had lost their lives. For some reason, there was no one at school, and communications were down, so she couldn't call the police, and she was afraid for her life. She asks how the protagonist could be so happy. Tae-in calls the girl's name, questioning if she has ever read a webtoon. He says they're fun to read, and you don't have to think too much about it. They were the only ones there because the author is lazy. The girl asks what on earth he's talking about, and the protagonist comments that she's too boring to be the female main character. Yoon-ye is surprised by this, and the protagonist thinks she's the villainess breaking the flow of the chapters. So Tae-in wonders if he should bring in another female character himself. He activates the interdimensional summoning skill, thinking he just needs a better protagonist. The portal begins to glow, blinding everyone there. Yoon-ye asks what that is. The protagonist says he wants to bring the most beautiful and charming woman from all dimensions here right now. All the monsters outside get scared. The smoke begins to clear. Il-jin asks what the pervert did. Tae-in is startled by the girl who emerges from the smoke. She holds a bloody knife. She stands in front of the protagonist as the smoke disappears. Tae-in is completely stunned. The girl comments that she struck Germain with her own hands. The protagonist thinks she's the protagonist from a novel who seduces the tyrant who was supposed to be the villain, takes his life, and becomes a villainess herself. Her husband was audacious from the first moment he called her by her name. That was the first time someone had called her so casually, the heiress of the House of Libershan. Tae-in interrupts her explanation, telling her to stop because no one allowed her to change the genre. He says she must be Layla, and knows how important the first 3 chapters are for a webtoon. If she brings in an outside narrative like that, he'll be stuck in school for the next 3 episodes, and readers will think it's a slow webtoon. The girl continues her explanation without a care, but Tae-in tells her to stop with the rehearsed lines and sparkling flowers. Layla questions who he is to raise his voice when they don't even know each other, and the protagonist tells her to put down the knife and talk. He thinks he doesn't usually read these romance fantasies, and the girl asks where she is and why she's dressed like this. A moment ago, she was piercing her husband with this dagger, but the protagonist snaps his fingers and throws the dagger away, telling her to clean up the blood as well with his magic. The girl becomes divinely beautiful, making Yoon-ye and Il-jin blush. Layla asks who he is, and Tae-in turns aside, saying it's coming. He then casts a defensive barrier using system magic. A monster outside strikes the school with its club, but only manages to hit the barrier with no other effect. Yoon-ye screams in fear, and Layla asks what on earth that was. Tae-in watches the monster strike several more times, screaming in frustration at the lack of results. The protagonist comments that it's a perfect idiot monster for a warm-up. He flies out through the window, using a system limiter to 1/1,000,000th of his power. With the unranked ability, Shock Finger, the blow easily destroys the giant monster. The girls are impressed. Layla comments that it was incredible, and Yoon-ye says that monsters and magic shouldn't even be possible. Tae-in says that as long as it's fun, nobody cares. Using the D-rank ability, Freeze, all the monsters are frozen with immense ease. The protagonist advances using the Stomp ability, causing an earthquake that destroys several monsters. Tae-in sighs deeply, saying he might have gotten too excited and destroyed everything. Even if he holds back, this power is too much. He then becomes happy about it. The system notifies him that he has defeated the first monster. An infinity of more monsters advance towards the protagonist. Tae-in thinks it's a fantasy game mixed with the hunter and portal genre, which is the best. He then activates flight at maximum speed, along with his psionic ability. The monsters are sliced apart as the protagonist continues to advance without stopping. He strikes a final dragon-shaped monster and then stops to think. He wonders what to do about the portal. Normally, he would have to go into each one and complete it, but he didn't need to bother, so he uses his dimensional exile ability. The monsters are teleported through the portal and sealed away without a chance to fight back. The protagonist says he'll just finish off the portal entirely. His dimensional exile closes. Tae-in comments that this should keep Seoul safe for now, teleporting back to the school. He finds the girls talking to each other. Layla says he's here. While he was gone, she was listening to people talk about this world, so she traveled to the future. The protagonist comments that wasn't quite it, but he would just adjust her to fit into this world using his transformation ability. The protagonist says that if she keeps that outfit, it'll be hard to draw her, especially after a fight with big monsters. Layla is then transformed into casual clothes. Kim Il-jin falls in love with the girl. Layla orders him to bring her a cape or a dress immediately. The protagonist says her hair must be hard to draw too, so he'll tie it up. Yunya says that's something she never wanted to know, that perverts tastes. Tae-in says she should hold back the aggressive words while they're talking among friends, and that he just picked something comfortable. Considering the whole setup, maybe the shorts are too much, but Il-jin begs him not to change them. The protagonist tells Miss Liebershan that he knows it looks new, but she can wear it. Yoon-ye asks if he can make any clothes, like Chanel or Louis Vuitton, and the protagonist questions if she's that kind of character. Layla interrupts, saying she's not Liebershan anymore, but Kleshwash, a noble name meaning she has become a princess of the royal family. The protagonist comments that even with her hair tied up, it's still a mess. Layla says she is no longer worthy of the name Kleshwash because she took her own husband's life. The protagonist says he's sorry and doesn't know the story of her world, but he has no idea what she was talking about. He can tell she's lived a tragic life. However, he doesn't want the details, and Layla asks what he's talking about. The protagonist tries to guess that she had a terminal illness, and the girl asks how he knew, but that wasn't all, as she probably had an arranged marriage with someone she didn't love, and her husband made a mistake, and things ended the way they did. She was falsely accused of being a villain, and then that incident happened. The girl cries, saying it's all true. Tae-in says it must have been tough, but she doesn't have to live like that anymore. Layla mentions she took the crown prince's life, but the protagonist replies that he attacked first. He activates the Seraphim's blessing on her and says she's done nothing wrong. The girl comments that she feels a warm sensation. Tae-in replies that he has cured every disease in her body, and she's no longer close to death. Now she can live freely in this world. Layla thinks that this time, she is free, without a powerful father or her most admired friend. Not even her husband, the crown prince. None of them had given her freedom. This man she had just met gave her this gift. The girl thanks him for it, crying. Suddenly, the protagonist notices he's defeated 33 monsters and earned an achievement. So he says it was nothing and just the beginning of the story. But the system informs him that the constellations are interested in his achievement. By satisfying constellations, he can receive sponsorships, unique skills, and item upgrades. The protagonist wonders what this is, with so many constellations interested in him. So he orders to block them all. The system refuses, asking how he can turn down such a great opportunity. Tae-in says that personally, he's not a big fan of constellations, but he changes the subject with his friends, asking if they all want to join him to save the world. Elsewhere, at the Interdimensional Council of Celestial Beings, some constellations gather. Huja Karuna of Raj asks how he dares to refuse a constellation's favor, saying he's never been so insulted. Omoshiroi, the constellation of games, says it was interesting, and Oshiku replies that maybe they should teach him a lesson. But Sekai, the king of constellations, tells everyone to calm down. Even though he's a human, he has ascended the Tower of Challenges and must be respected. Muramu of Despair says it's impossible since he's just a human, and Demeta of Envy adds that he skipped all the floors. A constellation asks to go to that dimension. He says he'll talk to him himself, and if he sees potential in him to change the order of the universe, he will eliminate the protagonist without any hesitation. Back on Earth, Tae-in says he's going to distribute all his power. Now they should go ahead and defeat the monsters at will, but Yunya says it's pointless. She wants to know why she should risk her life, and Il-jin agrees that it's too much. Tae-in tells them not to worry. Since they are his companions, They absolutely will not lose their lives. Yunye argues that at his level, he could take care of everyone by himself, but the protagonist complains that she keeps saying things like that. Even though he's the protagonist, if he just destroys everything alone, it wouldn't be any fun. Then a monster charges at him. The protagonist strikes the monster, killing it in one blow, saying that the stronger the main character is, the more interesting the stories of the characters around him need to be. Yunye says she doesn't understand anything he's saying, but Lila says she understood, so they have to kill monsters to save the world. She has already taken her husband's life. Now she feels she can take the life of anything. She turns towards a monster, and the protagonist thinks that his goal was to make this interesting, and for now, he would form his party. The role he had chosen for Layla. The girl activates her malice release ability and makes several cuts with her dagger. That monster is sliced into hundreds of pieces. Layla celebrates the feeling of release. She's the group's assassin dagger. Unye asks why she's acting like this, and the protagonist says she's established a clear character concept. The girl comments it's a feeling she's never had before in her life, as another monster approaches from behind, advancing to attack her quickly. Some tentacles grab her. Il-jin yells for them to save his princess, and Yoon-ye suggests they do it quickly. The hamburger advances, and the protagonist celebrates. He thinks about his role. Il-jin focuses and hits the creature with a powerful headbutt, but nothing happens, and he asks why his ability is so trivial, making him just a mascot. He yells at the protagonist to give him something cool too, and Layla thanks the hamburger. Il-jin turns around saying it was no big deal. Tai-in says that was fun, and quickly cuts the creature down. Yoon-ye was completely shocked by all of this. Tae-in says this is where she should show her ability, but Yoon-ye says she doesn't want to and can't. He is incredibly strong and can turn back time. Plus, he was chosen by the gods himself, so he can change things back to how they were before the world became like this. Everyone who lived their daily lives in this world is close to losing them, but his fun seems more important. Tae-in confirms this right away. He says that she'll understand someday too. In this world, having fun is the most important thing. Yoon-ye says the atmosphere suddenly changed. The protagonist yells that there's a bird monster flying there. She should defeat it with magic. The girl moves her staff from side to side. Holding it with extreme force, the monster is sent flying far away. Everyone is impressed by this. Aoun-ye was a strength-based warrior. Il-jin says she looked like a baseball player, and Yoon-ye comments that she trained a little when she was young, while Tai-in complains he didn't know that. Then he notices something behind his back. He turns to defend against a magic attack, wondering what kind of monster could do that. A man approaches, saying that to be able to interfere with his strong ki, especially with bare hands. Tai-in is surprised, recognizing who it is. The man says he's surprised to see an unknown master in the east. The protagonist says it's the heavenly demon. Cheon-ma asks how he knows his true identity, and the protagonist says he's a huge fan. Yoon-ye asks how the pervert knows who he is. Tai-in tells her to look up Cheon-ma's webtoon. He was an iconic character in the martial arts genre, and is always portrayed as the absolute villain. Cheon-ma comments that he talks too much, and that the tremendous energy coming from the east might have been his doing. Tae-in asks if he's talking about when he attacked earlier, and the shockwave hit the eastern peninsula of Korea. That was him, and he wants to know why he's asking. Cheon-ma explains that over the centuries, the world's martial arts have worsened, and humans have become weak beings. He was also losing interest in the peaceful world, so heaven and earth were being remade. Monsters started to appear there. Cheon-ma is happy when monsters fall from the sky. He experienced a chaos he had never known before. Just as he was about to be completely consumed by the chaos, a massive wave of energy suddenly rushed in from the east. Cheon-ma, shouting that it was dangerous, tried to defend by using the extreme seal of the heavenly demon god. The blast of power struck the man, but he managed to dissipate it. He was impressed by this destructive power, and it didn't end there. He watched as everything began to return to normal. He had witnessed an inexplicable phenomenon. Time was reversing, restoring everything that had been destroyed. This was undoubtedly the work of an absolute master. His instincts drove him to move, walking on water to cross continents and seas, and so he arrived there in person. Yoon-ye said, setting aside the fact that he crossed the China Sea, how can a Chinese person speak Korean so well? Tai-in grumbled that she had a point. Cheon-ma called out to the unknown master from the east, declaring he would take his life now. Tai-in shouted that this was so cool, because this was the real heavenly demon. Cheon-ma laughed, saying they should have a little fun. The girls thought that maybe he didn't want to do this. Cheon-ma prepared his demonic energy, unleashing the celestial dragon palm against the protagonist. The blow caused a huge explosion, but the protagonist appeared behind him saying, "That was a very slow attack." Cheon-ma turned, wondering what had just happened. Taeyin mentioned he'd always wanted to do that, get behind an enemy and say "too slow" in a deep voice. He had awakened and grown stronger, and now he wanted to know just how strong Cheon-ma was, because that technique was awesome. Cheon-ma apologized for not understanding. Then he turned away, saying he'd lost interest and would rather go hunt the monsters ahead. It was a waste of time coming here. Iljin said that was just an excuse because his technique failed. Cheon-ma questioned if this country was Korea, thinking that having a mere weakling in charge left it with no future. But the protagonist called out to the heavenly demon, warning him that he had crossed the line. He didn't care about anything else, but this wasn't just Korea. It was the Republic of Korea. Cheon-ma immediately recoiled at that. He said it was impossible, that he couldn't even feel his presence, so he tried to launch a palm strike at the protagonist. Taeyin simply watched the energy coming towards him, blocking it with a rock without any difficulty, but Cheon-ma trapped him with more demonic energy. Yun-ye called out to him. The heavenly demon reflected that this martial art